So welcome everybody to another podcast for Living Life Naturally. We're very happy to have you here with us again. And so here with me today, I have a special guest, Karen Sammer. Karen's got a very interesting background. She's actually a 10-year breast cancer survivor and a 2-year spontaneous coronary artery dissection heart attack survivor. So she's got lots of personal experience that will be really interesting to us. So in 2010, after she dealt with her breast cancer and the effects, of course, of chemo and radiation, she decided she was going to take care of her health. And so in the process of making significant life changes and losing, a whopping 135 pounds, she found her passion in learning about health and nutrition. So she was actually trained at the Mayo Clinic to be a WomenHeart Champion Community Educator, and she goes wherever there's an audience to talk about heart disease in women, what to look for, what to do if you have it, and how to prevent it. So that just in and of itself is a huge thing, but Karen actually retired from her corporate job as a director for tax audits. So what a change in professions. Now she makes a living as a health and nutrition coach, and she works with women who are living with or at risk for developing heart disease or other chronic illnesses. This is something that, as we know, when we get into midlife is even more prevalent for us. So Karen has actually learned how through nutrition and healthy lifestyles you can make changes to actually prevent and in some instances even reverse such conditions, which is really exciting. I know I have found this in my own life where I've reversed a few things. So Karen, welcome to the podcast. We are so happy to have you here. So
thank you for having me.
It's great. I'm excited. So tell our listeners where you are joining us from.
So I live in New Jersey, the western side of the state, not the side that they make jokes about. And I've lived here for most of my life. I moved here as a teenager, so I've been here all my, pretty much all my life. And nice and hot here today.
Oh my gosh. So we've got rain and storms, which is our norm in Florida for the summer.
Yeah.
Not always so much fun. So tell us a little bit about the Women's Heart Champion organization that you're involved with.
Sure. So the organization is called WomenHeart. It is the National Coalition to support women with or at risk for developing heart disease. It's the only patient-centered organization like this, and it's all about women and our unique challenges around heart disease. Women are often misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed in the hospital systems. If you don't fit a profile that they're expecting for somebody who's showing up with a cardiac event, you could very often be, again, misdiagnosed and sent home, and possibly to your great detriment. So what we do as WomenHeart Champions, in my case, I'm a community educator, so I go into the community and I talk about these issues. I bring an audience together and I talk about the challenges women have around heart disease, around recognizing the symptoms, because ours are different from men's,
Right.
Understanding that young women can have heart problems. What happened to me often happens to young women postpartum. And so if you showed up at the hospital looking like a 30-year-old fit young woman and you have a small child, you may be diagnosed with anxiety or exhaustion or something other than a cardiac event. And if you're sent home, and if you don't recognize the symptoms and you're sent home thinking that you have something other than a cardiac event, you could actually die from it. And it has happened.
Gosh. So tell me, what are the different symptoms that women should be on the lookout for when it comes to heart disease?
So often women do not feel the severity of pain that men do, or we have a higher threshold, whatever you want to say. But in my case, what happened to me is I started to feel a burning sensation in the middle of my chest, and it just radiated out to the tops of my arms. And I remembered in the back of my mind, because this is all pre-WomenHeart, that women's symptoms are different from men's. Because ours are not always severe, and they may not even look like heart disease. It may be a pain in your neck. It may be shortness of breath, which I guess often comes with men's symptoms. It may be a side pain or a back pain or extreme fatigue, or it could feel like indigestion. It may not necessarily be that crushing Hollywood heart attack that we see where people, you know, clutch their chest and keel over. And so we don't necessarily understand what's going on with our own bodies. And when we show up in the hospital not looking like the person who's expected to have a heart attack, may be misdiagnosed. And we also prioritize everyone else above ourselves, which is often the case. If we feel something that's not quite right but doesn't really seem to be debilitating, we'll move on with our day. And you know, in the meantime, damage may be happening at the time while we're going through our lives.
And so when this event happened to you, and you started becoming more aware of some lifestyle changes, what was it that you kind of did in your own life, that the changes that you made to make a difference in your life?
Well, my changes actually began in 2009 when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that's when I went on the journey of healthy living. And so it was quite surprising to me in 10 years later, or whatever it was, 7, 8 years later, that I had a heart attack. But the heart attack that I had was not caused by heart disease, because what they found when they thought I was having a typical middle-aged heart attack, when they went in with expecting to place a stent, they found that there was no blockage that was caused by plaque. I have clear arteries. I'm a woman who's, you know, in the age group where arteries are not always so clear, but my arteries are clear and clean. But what they found was this spontaneous coronary artery dissection, which is where your coronary artery dissects, it splits, it's in 3 layers. One of the inside layer comes loose and forms a flap, and then it ends up blocking the flow of blood, which is what causes the heart attack. That's what happened to me. And fortunately for me, the interventional cardiologist understood what he was looking at, and pulled the stent out, because he may have actually done more damage had he placed the stent. There was no reason to stent me. And so I healed, everything's fine. But what that did for me is it made me understand that I really need to be really vigilant about my lifestyle. And because I had kind of fallen off with exercise, I kept pretty strict with my eating. I had kept my weight down mostly. I gained some of it back. But when this happened, I decided to make sure that once I was able to, I would start exercising again regularly, lose the weight that I had gained back, which I did. And I really feel amazing. I feel amazing for somebody who's as old as I am.
So really, I think people have this misconception when it comes to health coaches. They seem to think that because you mentioned the fact that you slipped off the wagon a little bit, and people always think, oh, a health coach, they have all the right answers, they do everything right. You and I both know that we have times in our life when we slip off, and we have to find ourselves pushed and motivated to get back on that bandwagon, right?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, you are so right. We're human beings, and we got to oftentimes people who find themselves in our positions as health coaches is usually because they are responding to a health crisis in their own life. And so, which is exactly why I did it. So when we go back into our old routines or our old lifestyle choices, oftentimes it's, just us being human, and we just need to get back on the straight and narrow. And often our clients are what make us do that, I feel, because we want to set a good example for them.
Yeah, and really because it's the flip side of we hold our clients accountable, but there's a certain part of it for us that how can we teach somebody to do this or be this type of person or make these changes if we're not doing it ourselves. So I find it very interesting that you've gone through so much, but you've come out so healthy. So I know you've changed your lifestyle, but you said you changed it before that, probably because of your breast cancer. So what did you do to change your lifestyle?
When I was diagnosed, I did a little research to find out why this happened or what causes cancer to grow in your body. And what I found overwhelmingly is one of the major contributors of cancer is really the choices of food that we eat. And or it actually, you know, the wrong foods can feed the cancer cells. They won't necessarily nourish us properly, but they'll certainly make the cancer cells very happy. And one of those things is processed sugar.
Right.
So I removed processed sugar from my diet in 2010 as I was going through chemo. This was a little bit easier for me than it is for a lot of my clients, because one of the things that chemo does to you is it makes you have a very metallic taste in your mouth, and you really don't want to eat anything. There were very few things. I think the only thing that I could actually taste was peanut butter.
Wow.
So I didn't eat a lot during that time, and it was easier for me to, and I felt so lousy anyway. It was easier for me to drop sugar from my diet without noticing, because I felt so bad, wasn't hungry, wasn't interested in anything to eat. But when I did that, the changes were astounding. I lost 135 pounds. I got my energy back. This is post chemo. I got my energy back. My joints, my feet, my ankles, my knees, my hips that always hurt weren't hurting anymore. Even before I lost all the weight, I had started to lose the weight, but before I had lost the amount of weight that I lost, I was still starting to feel so much better. Nothing, and it's still at this time, at this far along, none of my joints hurt. I feel I have high energy level. I have no joint pain. I have arthritis, but it's not painful. And I just feel like I feel better than I did 30 years ago.
That's a big key, isn't it? Because I've been on that sugar bandwagon myself. And I often say I wish they had an essay, a Sugaraholics Anonymous, because there's so many things that they have that for, but yet sugar is really an addiction, and, you know, contributed to my migraines. And when I got off that sugar bandwagon, it just helped significantly. So it's not just about the pure sugar, right? What people don't realize is it's hidden sugar in all of our food.
Absolutely. You really have to become a label detective to find where sugar shows up. At last count, I know of 257 different names that sugar has. And it shows up multiple times on a label, but if you don't recognize the names, you don't realize it's sugar. There are so many different ways it is, you know, in a food label, 8, 10, 15 different types of sugar will show up. And it's used as a flavor enhancer. Sometimes it's used as a preservative. We know all that. And it's also, it causes it to become addictive. And that's really what the food companies want, is that they want you to become addicted to their foods. So that you will go back for more. I mean, how are they going to stay in business if you're not going to come back for more? And so but it has no nutritional value for us, and it really causes a lot of damage to our bodies. It causes inflammation. Inflammation is, I think, the root of many diseases.
Yes, I agree.
And migraines. I mean, certainly migraines are, you know, heavily supported by lots of sugar.
Yeah, and processed foods as a whole.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because of all the chemicals and
So did you find that when you started your journey for healthy living and healthy eating after your breast cancer, did you find that it was still the same kind of nutritional content or eating that you did after the heart attack, or did you have to make even more changes?
One of the things that anybody who has a cardiac event should do is go through cardiac rehab. And that's what I did. So what I had done since 2010 is I made incremental changes to my diet, and I became vegetarian, bordering on vegan, but I still eat fish. And I went gluten-free because it made me feel better. And I eliminated dairy from my diet because dairy is very inflammatory. And I've heard cheese referred to as the nutritional equivalent to Vaseline. So that sticks in my head. I have no interest in eating cheese. That was a pretty high profile doctor said that. So when I had the heart attack, I went through cardiac rehab, and I went through the Dean Ornish program.
Yes.
And Dean Ornish, yes, anybody who's a health coach has probably heard of him.
Yes.
But for many years, he has had a program that is vegan except for egg whites and non-fat dairy, I believe. But his program is a 4-pronged approach, and the diet being what I just said, There's also love and support. There's stress release and exercise. And when you've had a cardiac event, you get a little PTSD and you're afraid to exercise. And so this was a really great controlled environment where you could go back to the gym or go back to exercising, and somebody there is going to save you if you don't, if something happens to you. And it really gives you the confidence to go back to exercise. So I did that program, and that just made me more aware of the stress in my life. It made it more important to me to exercise. And the love and support, I felt like I had love and support. I have a pretty big family and a lot of friends, and I feel like I do have plenty of support. But this group that we were in, what's unique about it is that the people who are in the group with you have also had a cardiac event. All of my friends and all of my family have not had that issue. So they really can't relate to what I've been through. And this was a huge part of it. It's the support that you get from people who understand. But that program really kind of brought me back to the straight and narrow as far as my good health, my healthy lifestyle.
So tell us a little bit about some of the women that you work with. What kind of things do you teach them, and what kind of results have you found that they have?
Several of the people that I work with, in fact, I would say probably 95% of them have a very low opinion of their ability to have success in taking hold of their life and really just kind of moving into a healthy lifestyle. They've had multiple failures in the past, or their perceived failures, and they've had lots of yo-yo dieting, up and down, weight fluctuations. They've had hormonal fluctuations, probably because of some of the food choices that they're making, or oftentimes. So one of the things that I do is I work with their mindset. Number one, I want to make sure that they understand that they are not, they're not a failure. They just they've just maybe not taken the right approach, or not had all the information that they need. I work with them on their lifestyle choices. One of them being stress management, because we all know about stress eating. I work with them on and you also want to make sure that they're getting plenty of sleep, that they are getting some social time. They're not all work and all family. They have to take some time for themselves, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And so there's lifestyle, there's mindset, there's lifestyle, there's nutrition, of course. Nutrition is very important. And you want to make sure that they understand, because we get bombarded every day with all different nutritional theories, nutritional ideas. Some of them are really crazy, some of them are really sound, but you have to really be able to weed through and understand. You have to have a little bit of understanding of what's good and what's really not so good. And I help them to cut through all of the noise and find the solution that's going to work for them. Because if it's something that's unattainable or unsustainable for them, what's the point? They're really not going to do anything. And then exercise is another aspect of it. Is exercise is important. And when you're trying to lose weight, exercise and nutrition are very important, but nutrition is really the biggest piece of it. I would say it's an 80-20 split, 80% nutrition, 20% exercise. But it is important to get exercise to strengthen your heart muscle, because you need to keep that strong. And I've had some clients. I worked with a client who was diabetic and with high blood pressure, out of control on medication, both of those numbers. They worked with me for, I want to say 4 to 5 months. And they went to the doctor, and the doctor wanted to know what they were doing, because the numbers were in place, the numbers were good. This happened to be a man. Normally I work with women, but this was somebody who needed my help, so I worked with him. And his numbers were, his doctor was astounded that his numbers had never looked so good. And another client of mine was a young woman, and she was being threatened with having to take a statin. She was in her early 20s, and her cholesterol was at 260, I think it was. We worked together for 6 months, and she brought her cholesterol down 70 points. Her triglycerides were in good shape. Her HDL, LDL ratio was good. She brought her HDLs up and her LDLs down. Triglycerides were down in the healthy range. And she brought her cholesterol down to 190. So the threat of statin is no longer on the table.
So do you work with many women who have had heart attacks?
So I work with women who are more so at risk of developing heart disease, or they have heart disease, or they have the precursors to heart disease like diabetes or high blood pressure, or they're under a lot of stress, or they've just put on some weight. You know, as we age, our weight goes on differently, right? And when you have that that visceral fat in your abdominal area, that's really dangerous around your heart. So it's dangerous for your organs. It's, you know, you're at higher risk for various types of cancer. You're certainly at high risk for cardiac disease, coronary artery disease, and diabetes, and, you know, a whole host of metabolic syndromes, diseases that can ultimately lead to cardiac disease. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so my clients are mostly people who are on that path and they want to get off that path. And oftentimes it's to lose weight. I mean, the most obvious part of the risk for them is the weight gain. And so they want to make sure that they can get the weight off.
Yeah, it's very important, especially as we go through midlife and beyond, because we just tend to accept the fact that, hey, I've got this belly now, I never used to have it, but oh, it's just part of midlife. But people don't realize how dangerous that can be for us. Yeah. And I think they don't really believe that they can get rid of that fat. But I'm sure that you have found, just as I have in my practice, that that's absolutely not true. And as women, we can work on that and we can be successful.
Absolutely. You just have to take the right approach, and you really have to have faith in yourself. And that's the big part of it. Is yes. You know, go easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace. You've had a life. You've lived a life. Maybe you've had children. Maybe whatever. You've got busyness going on in your life, and so you need to really give yourself some grace. And that's really, you know, I try to get my clients to give themselves a break. Give themselves, you know, be nice to themselves. Be nicer to themselves than they certainly are, and be as nice to themselves as they are to anybody else.
Yeah, women tend to be very hard on themselves, and I think even more so in midlife, because there's so many changes going on. They don't like the way they look. They don't like the way that they feel, because everything changes. Their kids leave, they go to college, and just so many factors can make them feel that way. So I know you take the same approach I do, that's a holistic approach. So you're dealing with every aspect of a person's life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's all important, because it all makes you the person that you are. Mm-hmm. It's not just about the food you're eating. It's not just about the number of jumping jacks you can do. It's everything. It's all about what you bring to the world, and it's understanding your value in the world too, because that's really important. If you don't think you're worth it, you're never going to be successful at doing anything for your own health. So it's really important to understand your value.
It is, and I think that's where a lot of our work starts, is helping people really understand that. I'm sure you found that with so many of your clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I like to do is when I work with my clients is to help them to reframe the negativity that they have running around in their head, because it's very loud. The voices in your head are very loud. And the negative voices are even louder way louder than the positive voices. So it's really important to quiet that negativity and bring out the positivity, and really kind of reframe those thoughts about how you're a failure, or you just, you know, this is never going to work, whatever noise you're listening to, and really understand that, you know, look at what you actually have been successful at. And give yourself credit for something like, you know, that you have been successful at. And if you've been successful here, why can't you be successful here?
So you have gone through a lot in your own life with breast cancer, and then with the heart problems that you've had. What would you say has been a biggest aha moment that you have had, or something that's really been a catalyst in getting you onto this path to healthy living? Have you been motivated because of your past health issues, or, you know, what's been a catalyst for you?
Initially, it was the cancer. Scared the daylights out of me. It really did. It was an aggressive form of cancer. There was a medicine that was introduced, I think, 7 years prior to my having developed it. if that medicine wasn't available to me, I would have had an 85% chance of recurrence.
Wow. Mm.
So it brought that recurrence, that chance of recurrence down significantly. But there's always a chance it could come back. And that is always in my mind, not to the point where that I obsess over it, but it sort of directs me in my lifestyle choices. Mm. That was the initial part. And then with the heart attack, that actually made me, it took me a little while after that, but it actually made me understand that this is really the population of people that I need to speak to, because I feel like there aren't enough women who understand just how prevalent heart disease is with women. 1 in 3 women will be affected by heart disease in her lifetime. Mm. And it kills more people in the US than all cancers combined. So
and it is so dangerous because, as you say, it really for women can be like the silent killer because you don't recognize the symptoms and the signs.
Absolutely. And and a lot of the medical, although they've gotten better with this, but a lot of the medical modeling was done with men because women had hormonal fluctuations that would skew the results, but that's part of being a person, being a human female. So the medications and the medical devices and dosing and what have you are all based on the male body, and we are not just men with uteruses. We've actually got a completely different physiology that includes hormone fluctuations, and that can actually have an impact. They actually think that what happened to me in some people may be as a result of some kind of a hormonal situation. They really don't know a lot. What happened to me was rare, and they really don't know a lot about it. They're learning more and more, but typically it appears to me, just from some of the things that I've read, that the women who are in their early years, in their 30s or postpartum, or just young, vibrant women who die suddenly of a heart attack, I think that they didn't necessarily know that SCAD, which is what they call what I had, was the problem, but I think they're finding more and more that is actually the cause of a lot of young women dying of a heart attack.
So what would be some words of wisdom that you could give to our listeners today?
It is so important to be educated. Knowledge is power, and you really want to know you want to know what your risk factors are, because some of them are genetic. That doesn't mean you have to be a slave to your genes, but some of them are within your grasp. And 80% of heart disease can be prevented. So it's important to understand what causes it, what you can do to prevent it, how you can mitigate your risk, and just understand what it feels like if you're having a cardiac event. And you know your body better than anybody. Don't allow somebody to be dismissive of you. If you feel like there's something going on, but you don't necessarily know what it is, do not allow somebody to just dismiss you out of hand because they think you're just exhausted. You need to be tested. If you think you're having a cardiac event, you need to ask for the proper testing. You need to ask for a complete cardiac workup. And don't allow them to just push you aside. It will happen to your detriment if you are having a cardiac event. Mm-hmm. So understand what's going on, what your risk factors are, what to do in the event that you're having some kind of a cardiac event. Know what the symptoms are, and just have a baseline understanding of what's going on in your body.
Thanks. So it's been very informative. I think as midlifers and beyond, we sometimes seem to think that we still have this Superwoman syndrome, and it's hard to think that this stuff can happen to you, but it can. But there is hope out there, right? You found that yourself, yes.
Absolutely. And WomenHeart is a really good resource. If it's a free resource, womenheart.org. You can go there and get all kinds of information about heart disease in women, and there's all that you can be matched. If you have heart disease, you can be matched up with another woman who has had something similar to what you have, so that you can kind of discuss the path that you're on, that she may be farther down the path than you are. There's just this great support network. And of course, you know, so that, because these are the women that I work with in my heart, on my health coaching practice, I would be delighted to give yeah, a free consultation to anybody who wants. And
yeah, I will leave in the show notes how they can contact you,
okay.
so that they can reach out. I believe you gave me email as well as your website information.
Yes.
And I'll put it all in there.
Excellent. So on my website is a calendar link, and you can go in there and schedule a free consultation. And what we'll do is we'll talk about what your particular health challenges are. And they don't necessarily have to be heart related. That's really where my specialty is, but I do work with other people who are not necessarily at risk for heart disease. But you go in, you make an appointment with me, we talk about your health challenges, and then we can discuss next steps for you to put you on the path for healthy living.
Thanks. I think this is just such an important subject or topic for our listeners, especially as women, because as you say, we tend to take care of others and before we take care of ourselves, but yet it's very important for us to take care of ourselves, to make sure that we are not having that feeling of, oh, if we take care of ourselves, it's selfish, because it's really just the opposite. How can you give to others if you're not taking care of yourself? Absolutely. So I so appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your personal experiences with us today.
Thank you.
Again, reach out to Karen if you have some questions. I will leave you everything in the show notes so that you can reach out to her. And we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, Karen, so much.
Thank you so much, Lynn. This was really fun. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Thanks. So we will wrap it up for this week. And thank you again for joining us for the Living Life Naturally podcast. As always, you can go to my website. The links are in the show notes, and check me out and learn more about how I can help you. So thank you for joining us today. We've enjoyed being with you, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.